Y'all, I feel like I'm being buried alive under a pile of eyeshadow palettes. I keep a pretty edited collection of eyeshadow palettes, and then usually weeks, if not months, go by when none of them come to me in PR. But then it's like when it rains, it pours. And what happened to me just recently is that I got the new Alter Ego palette, the Luster, it just says Luster on it, but I think it's called Luster Charm. The Luster Charm palette from Alter Ego, which is very pretty. It's getting me. I'll explain why in the video. I also did receive in PR the Samantha March X Ofra Life's a Draft palette, which is, I was talking in my new makeup releases video about how attracted I am to this like really sort of, it's not a mauve, it's like a ruddy red shade that really lights up an eye look, especially if you have any green in your eyes. So I'm super excited about that. And then Odin's Eye sent me a bunch of palettes as well. So this is like a lot for me all at once, for me to be, like reviewing, testing, forming opinions on all of these all at once. And so I decided to just sit down and I think what I'm gonna try to do is put at least one eyeshadow from just at least one thing from an Odin's Eye palette, and then at least one eyeshadow from the other two. I'm gonna do one look with 3 palettes, basically 3 or more palettes. And that's all this is gonna be. And I'll talk about the palettes. If you're new to my channel, then hi, I'm Hannah. I'm so glad that you're here. I am a passionate lover of beautiful things, but I try not to let my personal makeup collection balloon out of control. I try to just, keep an edited collection, as I said, and use what I have. So there's a balance between a love of beauty and a desire to just moderate consumption on my channel. If that sounds good to you, I hope you'll subscribe. Now, let's go ahead and get into the meat of the video. I don't have very much makeup on my face right now, just a little bit of base makeup, green color corrector, a little bit of the Sephora Best Skin Ever foundation, and a little bit of spot concealer. And then of course I'm wearing the Queen gloss, which is really lovely, not sticky, light coconut scent that's not too sweet. And it's like a sheer goldy honey color. So it gives just a little bit of a wash of gold, but without really changing the color of the lips or competing with the color of the lips. That's really nice. I have a little bit of soap in my brows, and I'm gonna prime my eyes with the Alter Ego shadow base, which I actually quite like. It's a really good option, I think, for an affordable eye primer. Even though it's a matte, and that's not usually what I do, I'm gonna start with this color from Samantha's palette because it is what has really been capturing my imagination on the eyeshadow front lately. The color is called Cherry, and indeed it is somewhat of like a muted, very wearable cherry. I'm gonna pack it all over my lids with my finger. And I'm gonna use kind of a big fluffy brush to blend the edges of that and blend a little bit more of the shadow in there. I'm gonna be using Refer brushes. That's pretty much all that I use for my eyeshadows. This is the first time I've used this palette, and it's very velvety. This matte is very velvety. Because I don't really like mattes that much, I'm pretty picky about them. Yeah, this one's definitely, it's passing muster. Okay, that's gonna work as a base. If I were just making a look with this palette, it would be pretty easy to go in and complete the rest. I mean, it's one of those palettes that like really, really hangs together. In its simplicity, it gives you everything that you need, but I feel like you can come up with striking looks with it. But I want to try to mix with the other palette. So I'm not going to give into the temptation to I would probably go into like this darker purple in the outer corner. Maybe I'll come back and use it. But first I'm gonna see what 1 or 2 of the other palettes has to offer this look. But before I move on, I wanna put this same color, Cherry, on my lower lash line, because when I'm using like a red like this to make the green in my eyes pop, I always like to put it above and below my eyes. Okay, I'll probably come back to that shade to intensify the color a little bit more later, but let's dip into, what do I want to do? I think I want to go ahead and deepen up the outer corner, but maybe I want to pick something a little bit unusual for that. Okay, this is curiously, because rainbow palettes usually aren't my jam. Curiously, this palette from Odin's Eye, which is the Alva 2, has really captured my imagination. And I think it's partly because of these matte, like look how that shadow's glowing on the screen. These like matte pastels that have a lot of pigment. I mean, look at that. And because I don't tend to go for these kinds of colors. I don't really have stuff like this, so I'm not looking at this and being like, oh, yet another rainbow palette with a little bit of shimmer and texture that, you know, I could use to get the same look that I can use other palettes to get. It's not like that. I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh, I've always wanted to do a weird, just like single shadow all over the eye look where I use a shadow like this, just like washing it out, you know, a little bit modern avant-garde. And I haven't had the tools to do that because I just don't tend to gravitate towards or collect those kinds of shadows. So obviously I'm not doing that today. I think maybe what I'll do is I'll try to work a little bit of this really deep blue shimmer into this look, into the outer corner, and then maybe mix with this brown to try to kind of neutralize it a little bit so that it's not so intensely colorful and kind of marries more with the red that I already have on my lids. I think that's what I'm gonna do. Obviously I don't have a plan. I'm kind of just going where these palettes lead me. Okay, I think that's gonna work for me. And yes, I did just put a matte all over my lid and then a shimmer in the outer corner. I get bored with things being the same old, same old. And I also feel like metallic shadows, I don't know, they get kind of a bad rap. I find them really easy to work with. I find the metallic pigments make shadows really creamy and more blendable and just easier to work with in a lot of cases than mattes, which can sometimes stick and dust away. So I just use metallic shadows all over the place. I don't think that they should be relegated to just like the center shade, the center of the lid shade, and then everything else is with mattes. And I mean, it worked out, right? It's working out, I feel. All right, let's move on to the third palette just so I can like fulfill the brief right out of the gate. And then I can tinker with what I've ended up with until it's finished. So the thing that really, I like this more than I expected it to. When I saw it, when Alter Ego was like, we're sending you our new palette, I was like, great. And I clicked through and I looked at it and I was like, like it's just neutral. I was like, it's just another neutral palette. And then I got the palette and I opened it and I started swatching and playing with it. And I was like, oh, because these are shades that I really like. And there is some really luscious like dimension to them. It's not just neutrals. It's like they have a little bit of an edge of grunginess. And there is an attempt at some extraordinary shifting quality. Like I think that this is supposed to be imitating a Pat McGrath palette. And so they have tried to do, you know, some like shade shifting stuff. I don't think that this is as kind of like creamy and extraordinary as the ones that you would find in the actual Pat McGrath palette. The color, the tones of the colors are striking me as very sophisticated and wearable and the kind of thing that I really, really like. So I've actually been excited to wake up to this on my vanity every day for the past several days. And the thing that excites me the most about it is that this shade Sacred is one of those shadows that I always get a ton of use out of. It's a sheer shade with it's like little tiny glimmers in it, but they spread out in a sheer base and it ends up looking very, very wet and very, very reflective. So it's similar to Natasha Denona Cava. That's like my all-time favorite version of that kind of thing. Similar to the topper in the Tom Ford Cream and Powder Shadow in Naked Bronze. That's an alternative to Cava for me that I often reach for. And I have significant pan on both of those shades. They're like my most used eyeshadows. I would say that this comes in third in terms of shine and creaminess. It's a little bit dry compared to those two, but it certainly serves the purpose that they serve. And it's exciting. And I like the shade of it too. I like the kind of pale peachy shade. And it's just exciting to see a shade like that show up in such an affordable palette. In that spirit, I'm going to use it. I'm going to use it. I'm going to put it all over my brow bone. And I think I might take it down over the blue there that's on my eyes, because one of the things that I like about these shades, these like reflective shades, is that they tone down whatever's underneath them. You can use them as a wash over something and the color will still show through because it's a semi-sheer shade, it's a topper. But the reflective particles blink back the light that's shining on the surface, and it then like kind of softens the color and the depth of whatever's underneath it. So I'm going to try to soften this blue a little bit by washing this glittery shade over that part of my eye look. And I'm also going to take it up on my brow bone. But I don't want to totally obscure the brightness of the red, so I'm not going to put it all over the center of my lids, at least not for now. I love to layer eyeshadow. I think it's something that people are often afraid to do because they're precious about what they've already put down and they're afraid they're going to mess it up. And, you know, I've said this before, but the only way to become more confident with it is to experiment with it and learn firsthand that it's possible to do without losing something. I mean, you do obviously change what you've put down, but often the result is something more blended, a little bit more organic feeling. And I feel like that is what's going on here. It's made that blue look less like it's made it just look more softer, a little more watercolory, a little more blended. And of course, it's added some shine. Okay, I'm gonna dip back into Cherry, Samantha's shade, and I'm going to just reinforce that color on my lids because I want it to be deeper. I don't want it to get swallowed up in everything else that I'm doing. But I have a feeling that I'm gonna wanna layer over it as well. So I wanna give it just a little more fortitude. Yeah, I'm gonna sweep a tiny bit of the glittery shade from Alter Ego, like in this part right here, to blend the matte that I just put down in this area right under my brow. And I'm gonna put more of it on my lower lash line. I feel like I can afford to buff it. Actually, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna get a red liner. This Milani liner is called Picante, and I'm gonna put it on my waterline. Now I'm gonna add some more of the matte shade from Samantha's palette. Yeah, now we're cooking with gas. Here's what I wanna do. I wanna take one of the glitters from this shadow palette. Is that what I wanna do? Yeah. I'm gonna use this one called Pop Rocks, which is more sheer. It's like a sheer, it's got a little green in it. I do want to introduce a little green to keep it from being just so red and blue. And it's also, you know, it's iridescent, so it's going to blend in. I find like things that have sort of like a sheer iridescence as opposed to just a straight metallic shine tend to, again, blend in, be more organic. I'm going to tap it over the center of the lid. Yes. Okay, I feel like that's all really hanging together. The thing that I usually do that I'm not doing today is that I usually add a really dark brown or black to my outer corner and or to my waterline. So I have created dimension in that I'm going from, you know, a washy kind of iridescent orangey cherry red to a blue, to sort of like a washy iridescent blue. And the blue is a bit darker, but the contrast from shade to shade isn't as dramatic as I usually make it. I usually make sure that there's a lot of contrast between the outer corner and the lid. So in that way, this is a lighter eye look than I usually wear. And I kind of like that. I like that that's what I've ended up with. It feels really different for me. And, you know, this combination of colors also feels really different for me. It's fun to combine different palettes and kind of like clashing ideas and make it work. And I definitely didn't envision this. I ended up with something that I couldn't have anticipated. So I like that. There's not really any fallout to speak of, but I'm just gonna make sure that my under eyes are like clean and bright, and I'm going to put on some mascara and then I'll give you a close-up. I'm really pleased with this. I feel like it has a kind of sultriness. I usually would expect such a colorful look to be more playful feeling, and in that way a little bit more childish is the wrong word, like just maybe a little bit more cartoonish feeling, you know? But it doesn't feel that way to me at all. It actually feels very elegant in its own way. And again, like kind of soft, but it's got all of these playful elements and it's got more color than I usually wear in one look. So this is really fun. And I'm gonna keep using these palettes to finish my face. I just need to put a little bit of something on my cheeks. I don't want it to be too much, but I want it to be something. I think what I'm gonna do is use Samantha's palette because it has actual face products in it. But I did want to mention that I've been wearing this shade from the Luster Charm palette as a blush, this one called Rare, and I've been loving it. I've had it on my cheeks as a blush in a couple of videos. I'll try to give you a sense of how it looks it's hard to give you a sense of how it looks just watching it like this. I mean, because it's an eyeshadow, a little bit goes a long way. On the cheeks, I've just been using a very fluffy little brush and blending it and blending it and blending it. But it's like blended out. It has a little bit of a ruddy undertone that makes it work for a complexion product for me. So many complexion products lean too much into peach or pink or red. Even bronzers tend to sometimes lean really into red. And this one wasn't intended to be that kind of color. So it really stays like in the brown world. And that's what I love. All right, I'm gonna use this shade called 6. I know that Ofra's face powders tend to be pretty pigmented. I'm tapping it off a lot because I haven't used it yet. I don't know what the deal is gonna be. And I don't wanna get too intense of a cheek today. Yeah, I'm glad that I tapped the brush off because I was able to really do the whole thing with just that one bit. I'm gonna do the other side, and then I'm also gonna wash it a little bit into the eye look, try to make it as cohesive as possible. It's so pretty. The sheen on it is really pretty. I love it. I really love this. It's like glossy. I am so into creams right now, and I'm so rarely using powders that it's impressive that it's impressing me with its glossiness, given that it's a powder. It's very finely milled and it's applying with this really wet look gloss, even though it's a powder. So that's great. And I feel like even though I used a blue, really the defining color, like the dominant color of the eye look is that matte from Samantha's palette, Cherry. And so it makes sense that this shade would end up looking very cohesive with the eye look because this is a very cohesive palette. Pleased. And that's the look. I feel fresh-faced and glossy, but still colorful. I feel sophisticated, but still playful. And I also feel like I can go about the rest of my day without feeling like I look like I have so much makeup caked on my face that I was definitely filming and it's incongruous with just living the rest of my life, you know? Sometimes that does happen, but this actually feels very wearable for me to me. So that is great. This was so fun. I don't know if I'll end up keeping any of these palettes. Like if I probably won't keep all of them. To keep 3 palettes that all came in PR within the space of a month is a lot for me. For my palette collection to grow by 3, even in 6 months, is a lot. So I definitely can't imagine keeping all 3. But if I keep any of them, I don't know which ones they'll be. I need to get to know them a little bit better first. But it was fun to do this on camera, to experiment with trying to use a bunch of different palettes to create one eye look, thereby showing you guys what each of them kind of offers to me, what stands out from each of them to me, and how some of these shadows work in practice. I hope that it was as fun to watch as it was fun for me to do. And I especially hope that you are remembering to take extra good care of yourself today so that you can be the most effective version of yourself as you do your work in the world.